Deep inside a limestone cave in the west of England, a team of archaeologists brushed the dirt away from something that made them stop breathing for a second. A human skull, carved into a cup, not shattered in violence, not crushed by a rockfall. Carved, deliberately, patiently, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The rim had been smoothed by hand until it was almost delicate. Whoever made this didn't do it in a rage. They did it with time on their hands and a plan in their head. Around it lay more bones. Human bones, stripped clean of flesh. Marrow cracked out for food. 14,000 years old. For decades, no one wanted to say the obvious word: cannibalism. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was why. Because some of those cut marks didn't match hunger at all. They matched care. A kind of ritual precision you'd expect from someone honoring a body, not devouring one. Which means the people who did this weren't monsters caught in a moment of desperation. They may have been mourners, speaking a language of grief so old and so foreign that today it looks, to us, like horror. Picture it for a second. Firelight flickering against wet cave walls. A small group huddled together, the last of their dead laid out before them, and outside, an ice age winter that has already taken more people than they can count on their hands. What do you do when the ground is frozen too hard to dig a grave, when there's no food left, and the person lying in front of you was someone's mother, someone's brother, someone they loved? This is the real story hidden underneath the word survival. Not clean heroism. Not brave men fighting off wolves in the snow. Something far stranger and far more human. Ancient people doing the unthinkable and somehow remaining people while they did it. Go back far enough and the math of daily life becomes almost impossible to imagine. One failed hunt could kill an entire group before spring. A twisted ankle could be a death sentence. Winters didn't last a season. Some lasted most of a person's short life. And when the food disappeared completely, some groups crossed a line most of us pray we never have to find. At a cave called El Sidrón in northern Spain, researchers uncovered the remains of an entire Neanderthal family. Not strangers. A family, adults, teenagers, children, all showing the same careful cut marks along the bones. Some evidence points to starvation. Other clues suggest ritual, a structured response to death itself. Either way, something extraordinary is hiding in that cave floor. Even 100,000 years before Guff's Cave, before Stonehenge, before writing existed anywhere on Earth, death already demanded a procedure, a way of being handled. These weren't animals reacting to hunger. They were people, trying to make sense of loss with whatever tools their world had given them. And when starvation didn't kill outright, it forced choices that sound almost impossible for the time period. On the island of Borneo, inside a cave called Liang Tebo, archaeologists found the skeleton of a young person, no older than a teenager, missing the lower part of one leg. Not lost in an accident. Removed. Deliberately. Likely with a sharpened stone tool, 31,000 years ago. Stop and imagine that operation. No metal. No antiseptic. No anesthesia beyond whatever herbs or shock the body could absorb. Someone held this person down. Someone made the cut. And somehow, against every possible odds, the wound closed. The bone remodeled. This person didn't die on the spot. They lived for years afterward, cared for daily by people who had every reason to leave them behind and chose not to. Think about what that means for the people around them. Every extra person who couldn't hunt, couldn't walk fast, couldn't run from danger, was a cost the whole group carried. And they carried it anyway. This wasn't an isolated miracle either. Across the ancient world, from Peru to Neolithic France to parts of Eastern Africa, archaeologists keep finding skulls with neat, perfectly round holes cut into them. Trepanation, cutting directly into a living human skull. Cultures that never met, never traded, never even knew the others existed, all arriving at the same terrifying idea independently. And many of these skulls show something remarkable: healed bone growing back around the opening. The patient didn't just survive the operation. They lived on for years, sometimes decades. Nobody knows for certain why they did it. Some researchers believe it treated head injuries or seizures. Others suspect something spiritual, an attempt to release whatever invisible thing was causing the suffering. What we do know is this: when the body failed, ancient humans didn't simply wait to die. They picked up a sharpened stone and they gambled everything on another human being's steady hands. But the deepest, coldest kind of brutality only appears when medicine runs out completely. When there's nothing left to try. Only each other. Picture Jamestown, Virginia, in the brutal winter of 1609. English colonists, cut off from supply ships, surrounded by drought and conflict, watched their population collapse in a matter of months. Historians simply called it the starving time. For centuries, reports of cannibalism from that winter were dismissed as exaggerated rumor, too horrifying to take seriously. Then, in 2012, archaeologists excavating the old fort found the skull of a teenage girl. Researchers gave her a name: Jane. Cut marks across her jaw, and skull matched careful, deliberate butchery, performed after she had already died. The rumor was true. And somewhere in that fort, in the freezing dark, people who had crossed an ocean chasing a new life made a choice they never imagined they'd have to make. 2 centuries later, almost the same horror surfaced 8,000 kilometers north, in a place with no forgiveness in it at all. In 1845, the Franklin expedition sailed into the Arctic to chart the last unmapped stretch of the Northwest Passage. 2 ships, over 100 men. Every single one of them vanished, and for more than a century, their fate remained a mystery that haunted the British Navy. Then researchers found bones scattered across King William Island, butchery marks on the crew's own dead. These weren't savages. These were disciplined naval officers, trained sailors, men who had written letters home describing the aurora and the strange, silent beauty of the ice, pushed past every boundary a human mind holds on to, by a landscape offering absolutely nothing back. Here is the twist almost nobody expects. Survival cannibalism, across every documented case in human history, almost never targets strangers or enemies. It happens within families, within crews, within the people who loved each other most, and it happens almost exclusively after someone has already died from something else. The horror isn't humans turning into predators. It's grief, stretched past its breaking point, with absolutely nowhere left to go. And that same instinct, the one that pushed people to unthinkable extremes, also produced something almost unbearably tender, buried in the same fossil record. In a cave in northern Iraq, researchers found a Neanderthal skeleton archaeologists now call Shanidar 1. A withered, useless arm. Significant hearing loss. A skull injury that by any reasonable calculation should have killed him as a young man in a world with no safety net at all. He lived into old age. Someone fed him every single day for years. Someone helped him move across terrain his body could no longer manage alone. In an Ice Age landscape where every extra mouth to feed threatened the survival of the entire group, they kept him alive anyway. For no measurable, practical reason except that he mattered to somebody. Sit with that for a second, next to everything you just heard. The same species capable of stripping flesh from the bodies of their own dead in a moment of total desperation was also capable of carrying a disabled companion across a frozen continent for decades. Both are true. Both are ancient. Neither one cancels the other out. They are somehow the exact same instinct, aimed in 2 different directions. And this isn't just an ancient story, sealed away in a cave somewhere. In 1972, A plane crashed high in the Andes Mountains, carrying a Uruguayan rugby team and their families. Survivors were trapped for over 2 months in freezing temperatures, buried by avalanches, with nothing to eat and no rescue in sight. Eventually, they made the same impossible choice that Jamestown made, that Guff's Cave may have made, 14,000 years earlier. They ate the flesh of those who had already died in order to keep the living alive. When their story became public, survivors never described it as savagery. They described it as sacred. A final, unbearable gift passed from the dead to the living, made under conditions none of us will hopefully ever have to face ourselves. The exact same unbearable math. Just dressed in modern clothing, on a mountain instead of in a cave. So go back, one last time, to that skull cup. Carved with total precision, 14,000 years ago, in a cave that still drips with cold water today. For a long time, it looked like proof that ancient humans were savages we've since left behind, relics of a darker, crueler stage of our own evolution. It isn't that at all. It's proof of something far more uncomfortable to sit with, that brutality and love, in the worst moments a human being can face, are sometimes the exact same act, just witnessed from 2 different angles. They cut into the dead to survive the winter. They cut into the living to try to heal them. They carried the useless, the disabled, and the dying rather than leaving them behind on the ice. Ancient humans weren't less human than we are. They were exactly as human as we are, with every comfort stripped away, forced again and again to answer the one question most of us will spend our entire lives never having to ask ourselves. And when that question came, in a cave in England, in a fort in Virginia, on a frozen ship in the Arctic, on a mountainside in South America, they kept choosing each other. Every single time, even when that choice looked, to everyone who came after them, like the most brutal thing a human being could possibly do.